Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniela Lurion, and I'm the director of FSWC's Tour for Humanity program. This morning, I'm thrilled to announce our first session of the day today, titled 80 Years Later, Memories of Auschwitz, featuring Holocaust survivors Hedy Bohm and Nate Leipciger, in conversation with Elena Kingsbury. Elena Kingsbury is a senior educator with FSWC. She has taught thousands of students across Canada, in classrooms and auditoriums, at our center, and on our award-winning Tour for Humanity mobile classroom. Her love of history and curiosity about the wider world began at a very early age. As a child, the majority of Jewish people she knew were survivors, like her maternal grandparents who escaped Prague for Denmark in 1939. This personal connection started Elena on an academic path that would lead her to Montreal and McGill University, where she completed her master's in history in 2014. Born in 1928 in Oradea, Transylvania, Hedy Bohm was the only child in a close-knit community. In 1944, Hedy and her family were sent to the Oradea ghetto, and from there, she was deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where she was selected for a forced work detail for an ammunition factory in Germany. Hedy was liberated in 1945. She shares her testimony in the hope of educating others on injustice and the importance of speaking out against all discrimination and prejudice. Nate Leipciger was also born in 1928 in Chorzów, Poland. As a child, he encountered Nazi occupation, was deprived of schooling, forced to be a slave laborer, survived 2 ghettos, and incarcerated in Auschwitz at age 15. Experienced 7 death and concentration camps and lost most of his family. He feels a moral obligation to speak on behalf of those millions who did not survive. Welcome, Elena, Hedy, and Nate.
Thank you so much, Daniela. And a major welcome to everyone on the call today. It's a real honor to be here with you all, and particularly an honor to be here with Hedy and Nate, our guests this morning. I want to start just by beginning and thanking you all for your willingness to share your personal memories and wisdom with us here today. We really don't take this gift lightly. If you're both ready, I'll begin. So first, welcome. And maybe we'll begin with Hedy. Can you start by telling me what life was like before the Holocaust? What was life like for your family?
For myself and for my family, it was life as we knew it. I was not aware of anti-Semitism at all. I lived in a relatively narrow Jewish circle, which also included my mother's younger sister, who was married to a non-Jew Hungarian. I had no idea that there was such a thing as anti-Semitism. I went to an all-girls Jewish school, same one my mother attended in her youth, and it was all girls, all female teachers except for our Hebrew teacher. And life was serene and quiet and secure. Never ever did I have the least bit of warning about what life is like. About the war, we knew there was a war, just as your young students know that there is a war in somewhere in the world, but we didn't think it will impact on us. We Hungarian Jews were so sure that we were valued citizens that my father wouldn't even entertain the thought that anything bad would happen to us Hungarian Jews, because He fought in the First World War. He was a soldier. He was wounded. He was a big patriot, and he thought he was a valued citizen. And so did the 30,000 other Jews in my hometown. They all thought that being Hungarian gave them some special privilege. And when it came down to the nitty-gritty, it was a big, big sudden shock. Unlike the other countries, Hungarian Jews didn't connect with real danger until 44. Until then, it was just hearsay, which we didn't think would impact on us.
Wow. Thank you so much, Hedy. Nate, does that ring true for you, or was your pre-war experience very different?
Yes, it was different experiences. Poland was not in the same category as Hungary, and of course, we didn't know about that at the time. As a child in 1939, when we were invaded by Nazi Germany, our life before that was difficult because there was a lot of we didn't know the word anti-Semitism, but we knew that there was a lot of violent acts against the Jewish people. The Jewish stores, people were prevented from going in and buying stuff from Jewish. My father was attacked in the street. I was attacked in the street. But we consider that as not an unusual occurrence, but something that we lived in a country where Jews were not always regarded well. And so this was a natural, we didn't think very much about it. We just felt it was terrible, and this too will pass.
Mm. So it felt like a pattern that was a part of a bigger history of the Jewish experience in Poland. That's very interesting. So I know it will be a very different answer probably for you both, but maybe we can talk a little bit about our first impressions upon arriving at Auschwitz. So Hedy, maybe do you want to, or Nate, do you want to start there since you're already on the screen?
Yes, of course. The arrival at Auschwitz,
Mm.
which we did not know the name, and we did not know the place. We were taken from our ghetto hiding place without any packages or anything like that. We had to go to the train. We were packed in a train like sardines, and we transported to a place which we did not know what happened, where it was. We were disembarked. My father was selected to go into one way, and I was selected to go the other way. And I was standing in the new lineup, and I was trying to ascertain what was happening in this place. And I saw my father was with the young people, my mother and my sister, whom I was separated very suddenly when my father came over to me and he grabbed me by my sleeve and he says, "You come with me." And I saw my mother and my sister were with the young people. So I was convinced that I would be in a place what they call resettlement. They told us that they're going to resettle us to a place where we can get jobs, food, lodging, and I was not worried because at that time I was 15, and I already worked for 3 years in a shoe factory, so I had no problem about myself. Then suddenly my father approached our line with an assessment. He called me and he said to the assessment, "This is my son. He's 17 years old and he's an electrician," which was true. And so the Nazi talked to me for a few seconds, and after that he said, "Okay, you can take him." And so my father grabbed me, he put me into the lineup with the young man, and a few minutes later we marched off. We marched to a large building, and we were disrobed. Our hair was cut. We were deloused, and then we were put in a number was on our arm, and that was the only thing that was with us. And then we were given a lecture that this is not a sanatorium or a summer camp. This is a concentration camp, and if you don't behave, you will join your people who are just now being processed by gassing to death. And I looked at my father and couldn't believe that that was happening. And he must have known because he nodded, so I say, yes, you better believe it. That was my indoctrination into Auschwitz, going from liberty in a ghetto with a family to being in a concentration camp, a prisoner with a number on my arm and terrible looking clothing, because the clothing that I was wearing, I was small in stature. I looked more like 12 than 15 or 17. And the clothes did not fit me, so I looked like a scarecrow with my sleeves and pants rolled up in order to fit into the clothes that I was given. So I was terrible. I felt terrible. The only saving thing that was that I was with my father together. That was a wonderful feeling of security in a place of terrible occurrences.
Mm. Having that support of even one of your loved ones made a big difference. So, Hedy, can you share a little bit about your first impressions of Auschwitz upon arrival?
It was very different from me. We arrived, it was 1944, towards the end of the war, in early June.
Mm.
And the whole thing that took years in Polish camps and ghettos happened within 30 days in Hungary. In 1944, I was still in grade 10 high school. And when in March, our principal gathered us in a gym and told us that unfortunately the latest law against the Jews is to close all schools, no more education for Jewish children. And he said goodbye to us and expressed his hope that after the war we will meet and continue. That's how little we knew about what was awaiting for us. Even a school principal who, like one of the leaders of the Jewish community, you would have thought was more informed. Anyway, that was in March. In May, in April, we were already in a ghetto. I had my 16th birthday in a ghetto in May, and within a couple of weeks, we were shipped out. The whole ghetto experience was 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks for the Romanian Hungarian Jews. Our place was Romania most of my life. I was born in Oradea, but it became Nagyvárad, a Hungarian city, in the Second World War, when it broke out in 1939. And it was also in my parents' time.
Mm.
In our ghetto experience was minimal. Within a month, we were all 30,000 of us shipped from the city to Auschwitz. to die.
Mm.
The Hungarians knew it and couldn't do it fast enough to make it faster and faster to get rid of us and take over our businesses and homes and houses. And
That's terrible.
we
And mm,
had 3 days and 3 nights in that cattle car with my mother, father, and part of the community on our way to Auschwitz. And it was a terrible experience of darkness and stench and people moaning and groaning. The doors, the windows never opened. There was just a little bit of a window with barbed wires where we got some air and a bit of light. Otherwise, it was the stench and terrible. After 3 days and 3 nights, the doors were flung open and we were told we arrived. We didn't know where, and when I looked out, I absolutely didn't understand where am I in this world. Never seen such a place. There was nothing to compare it to. What I saw was endless cabins, large uh, stable-like buildings in a row to the left, to the right, and ahead as far as could see, and nothing else. It occurred to me, and I couldn't answer, where was I? What is this place for? I mean, there was nothing in my experience to explain where we were or what was I looking at. But everything went fast. Took a minute to empty the cattle car, to have us standing, to separate the man immediately to the left. They said, man to the left. My father stepped to the left and joined the group, and that was the last time I saw him. Never again. And within another minute, while I was still staring at the scene and trying to make some sense of where am I, we were giving orders to march, the women. And I realized that my mom left already and was marching with a large group of women. I was running, trying to catch up to her. I mean, my mom, I've never been without her, and I never made it. Within moments, German soldiers stopped me with a rifle in front and wouldn't let me follow my mom. Pointed to the right where there was a group of young women that I should go there. And I burst out crying and I begged him to let me go catch up with my mom. And he wouldn't budge. The rifle stayed right there. And he was the most hateful person to me for my lifetime, until at some point I realized that he saved my life. Because unknown to me, we were marching straight to the chambers, poison gas chambers. I didn't know that they were there. I don't know if my mom did, and just maybe left me hoping that something good will happen. And kept on going, walking out of my life without the word. It was the most devastating moment, and I couldn't talk about it, even think about it, without uncontrollable crying for decades. It took me a long time, and a big resolution to make myself talk about it and to be able to talk about it without crying. But at some point, I decided it was important to talk about it.
It's
Auschwitz itself, it was Camp C for me, all women. We were immediately taken to shower, took away all our clothes, threw us a dress without underwear or panty, no panty, no slip, no bra, no socks, just an outer garment. And if you were lucky, it fitted. If it wasn't, you had to do it. And we were told to go and find a place in one of the 30 huge barracks was made at Camp C, which was mostly filled with the Jews from Hungary coming. And there I was alone. And there I stayed alone for about 3 months. Somehow managing to stay healthy. I realized immediately that without my mom, I have to think like an adult. I have to be smarter than I've ever been to survive and to meet again with my mom at the end of the war. I couldn't think of a life without her. And I adjusted everything I did to staying healthy, like going every morning before roll calls and in the washroom, took off my dress and washed in cold water from head to toe every morning. It was still dark. And then went to stay with the roll calls. And I tried to take care of myself and ate everything they gave me, which was that terrible, terrible soup mostly, which when I first tried, I cried and held my nose and swallowed as much as they gave me, because I knew that's it, and that little piece of bread that will have to keep me alive. And some people couldn't even swallow that soup. It was so terrible. My best friend told me she can't, for the life of her, swallow it. And I swallowed, cried and swallowed as much as they gave me.
Wow. So Hedy, that brings me to my next question, and maybe I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but would you say that that hope of being reunited with your mother and following her advice to stay healthy, is that something that helped you stay alive during your time in Auschwitz?
Absolutely. I
Okay.
believe if I wouldn't have made myself believe that my mom is in a similar place and that we will meet after the war, if I would have known that she was killed and that this murder is going on, I don't think I would have wanted to live. And without will, you never made it. It was really the will that pulled you through and made you do things you wouldn't have otherwise done.
Mm. And
But
Nate, I'm so sorry, Hedy. Did you want to continue? I'm
uh,
sorry to interrupt you. I hate to do that. I just wanted to maybe Nate is what would you say from your perspective was one of the key aspects of your survival?
definitely,
The key, of course, I was with my father. He was the uh, person that saved me on a number of occasions. And, he already saved me from the death by gassing on the ramp in Auschwitz. This was in 1943, and I did not know that the people are being gassed. And once you entered Auschwitz, you knew that that's what was happening to our people. I was hopeful that my mother and my sister would survive because I saw them with the young people, so I had great hopes that they would survive. And that was the driving thing was I was there and I was living from day to day in order to support my father, and he felt the same way. He had responsibility that I should survive. So both of us survived, helped each other. That was a very important aspect in my survival throughout the next 2 years of incarceration in 6 different concentration camps, and that was it. I would say if there was one word that was responsible for our survival was that of hope. Hope
Mm.
that we'll be able to resume our lives and that not everything was lost. Of course, we were wrong because everything was lost.
But it is a great, I think both of your stories, although very, very different, they both illustrate that power of hope and how important that is, as you said, Hedy, for, the will to continue and the will to keep fighting through all of that horror. Now, maybe we can talk a little bit about what liberate. I know that we're jumping ahead quite a bit, but maybe we can talk a little bit about what the experience of liberation was like. I know for both of you, you'd gone through a lot of changes, maybe also moved quite a far distance by that point. So, what was liberation like for you? Maybe let's start with Hedy.
Liberation was in Germany for me.
Okay.
3 months after arriving to Auschwitz, I was picked with a group of 500 and shipped to Germany to a factory that was making ammunition. It used to be a Volkswagen factory, and they remodeled it to make ammunition for the war effort. And they just sent in an order for 500 workers, and the following day we were shipped out. 500 of us arrived to Salzwedel, and the Volkswagen factory was at the edge of town. And across the street from it, buildings and places where the workers could stay were bombed down just the day before we arrived. Fortunately, the basement where we had our dormitory prepared for the 500 of us was saved. It was rubble all over it, next to it, left, right, above. But there was a basement, 500 beds waiting in a big hall, and miracle of miracles, this place wasn't built for Jews, so it was quite humane. It was two large dormitories filled with bunk beds, single bunk beds, which we shared with one other person. And there was a little mattress, there was a blanket, there was a pillow, miracle of miracles, and a shower with a dozen wonderful showers that had hot water. I think that was a lifesaver for coming back from 12-hour shifts in a cold factory. We as hungry as we were, we didn't go for the food. We went to hot shower to revive ourselves. And this was an everyday occurrence, and I'm sure it saved our lives. We were
So that
taken,
was where, oh, sorry, continue.
I was going to say, we were taken a week before liberation away. They were trying to get us away from the advancing uh, American army and put us on a cattle car again and went toward east. But they ran out of time and places because the Russians were advancing from the east with Americans from the west. So they dumped us wherever they could, which was another small camp where there was a place like Auschwitz camp. There was nothing in it, just a bare floor. And that's where they dumped us for the following week. And that's where we were until the Americans came a week later. And thank God for them. This whole week there, we weren't fed. And after, we weren't that fat that we could afford that, but we managed somehow to survive. But I don't know. Amazingly, the 500 people that came from Auschwitz a year ago to Fallersleben survived together again. All the 500 of us.
That's
We were
incredible.
unusually fortunate.
Very
The
much.
liberated us. One day we woke up and we were told the Germans are gone, the Nazis are gone, Americans are here. And they told us, go in the city, take whatever you want, watch what you eat, don't eat much. And we listened, thank goodness, so we survived. Hundreds of people were badly ill with dysentery and diarrhea because they couldn't control their hunger and
Right.
need to eat. My auntie and two cousins that I was with and myself, we tried and ate as little as we possibly could manage. And we all survived. And we made it home 3 months later.
Wow. And Nate, so you mentioned that you were through 7 different concentration and death camps. So do you want to tell us a little bit about how you ended up from Auschwitz to liberation and what that journey was like?
Well, the journey was always difficult. It was difficult to get out of Auschwitz. My father exposed himself and almost risked his life in order for me to be included in the transport. We went to a factory of a armament factory, a Krupp factory in near Breslau, and we were for 15 months. And then, then the war was coming to us from both sides, and we were moved from one camp to the other. We were moved on death march from one camp to another. We went to from Flossenburg, from Fünftachen, we went to Großrosen on death march. Then we had a death train, which we were loaded with this one. By the way, there's a picture of the boxcar that we came to Auschwitz in. This was during the visit with the prime minister. Was a picture taken, and we arrived at the next camp by marching, and then we went by train to Flossenburg, which was a very difficult camp, and we were very fortunate to be selected to go by train to another concentration camp, which was Leonberg, and there we were exposed to typhus fever, and we were sent. I think we were sent somewhere to be gassed or to be destroyed. A lot of people on the train died. There was a terrible situation where we were sitting at one end of the car, and The other half was reserved for people that were dead, and the waste basket, waste bucket, and this was lasted trip lasted 2 days, and we arrived in another camp, sub camp of Dachau, and then we were again moved to another camp, which was a forest camp, and there I became ill with dysentery and with typhus fever, and I was when the next transport went out of the camp. I said to my father, I can't go. I'm going to have to stay in the camp and take my chances, and whatever happens with the camp, whether they destroy it or not, I'm going to be here rather than be shot on the road because I couldn't walk. And we were allowed to stay by a miracle. And then on May that this was remember we started in 1943. This was May 45. I was emaciated. I was sick. I was sick in body and mind. And my father was a little bit better condition than I was. And finally, on May the 2nd, the American army came and we were liberated. It was an empty victory. We survived, but we didn't know who else survived. And we knew that there was the chance of anybody else surviving was very slim. So we were free, but I was very sick. I almost died after that. I was in deathbed and I had to recuperate for a number of months before I could say that I was alive again. And there was a very difficult time after the war. Many, many thousands of people died because we were beyond the point of recovery. And I was lucky. I was with my father and he nursed me. And he got some food for me that I could keep down. And the fever broke, and everybody thought it was a miracle that I survived 5 days of very, very very high fever. And then we were liberated, and we had to face the fact that we had no one and nowhere to go. We could not go home. Like Hedy said, she went back home. To us, there was no possibility of going back home at that point. It took months staying in Germany before I could venture home myself, but my father stayed behind, and I traveled to Poland to find out who survived. And the grim truth came at that point when I arrived at my my grandmother's apartment, and the lady next door, who was a wonderful wee woman. When I walked in there and I found out that my father's family, he had 7 siblings, 2 brothers and 4 sisters, were in Poland together with us, and none of them survived. 3 of their children survived. And my mother and my sister did not come back. And my mother's 2 sisters, were hidden by righteous among the nations, wonderful people who saved their lives by hiding them and taking them from place to place when it became dangerous to be discovered. And life was very, very difficult. I mean, going to Poland and getting out of Poland, regaining my father was a struggle. This was already September of 1945, 5 months later or 4 months later after the liberation. We're still not well. I had had problem with my health. And I had traveled through all of the borders in order to regain my freedom and be together with my father in the American zone. And then recovery was very, very slow. And we managed, but the saving thing was that I was with my father. And we did not go into a DP camp and living in a city in Bamberg by ourselves and receiving help from the UNRWA and from the Joint Distribution Committee was a lifesaver, and we managed to stay alive and actually thrive till we were ready to come to Canada in 1948, when my father's last sibling, his last remaining sibling, David, was who left Poland in 1912. And so we came to Canada, and the struggle continued. I did not have any education. I was very fortunate to be admitted into Harvard Collegiate at grade 12. And I graduated 2 years later and entered University of Toronto. That's begun my life.
Wow.
That was really the beginning of my life when I started to get an education. It was such wonderful feeling to learn new stuff and not to worry about surviving from day to day.
Living again.
Never again is right.
Yes, and I think the term that you used, empty victory, that really resonates, and with what Hedy described, and that difficult, even if there was sort of immediate joy at liberation, that there was a very difficult period of struggle and rebuilding and just discovering the extent of personal losses. And so it's incredibly inspiring to hear that you did go to university and started that journey of education. Now, to our audience, everyone watching, I just want to make sure that you're aware, if you have any questions for Hedy or Nate, please feel free to use the question and answer function, and we'll definitely we'll do our best to respond to them. Now, Hedy, maybe I could ask, and I'll certainly, I want to hear from you both. Why did you first begin speaking publicly about your memories of the Holocaust, and when did you begin speaking? Was it immediately after liberation, or did that take time?
No, it was long, decades after. I tried on occasion to speak about my experiences and the separation from my mom, and I would always break down at that point and cry uncontrollably, and I realized I just can't do it. So I didn't talk about it for a long, long time. Even to my children, my husband and I decided not to go to details, but always answer the questions they gave us according to their age and understanding. And I think we did, but never elaborate. We didn't want them to grow up with nightmares. And actually, I had nightmares all the time until the day my daughter was born. I'm 56. For 10 years, I had the nightmares. And the day my daughter was born, never again. That was my gift of faith. Not just my daughter, but stop the nightmares as well. but no, I couldn't talk about it for a long time. And the only reason I did is because one day I was listening to the United Nations speech where they announced to the whole wide world that there was no such thing as Auschwitz. It's all a Jewish hoax. There was never a Holocaust. I had to listen to this, who was there. I'm still here alive, and I have to listen to some person saying this to the world. Really, it made me realize that I can't keep quiet anymore, as difficult as may be. I must teach myself to talk about it and maybe, just maybe, influence some people towards understanding. Well, that's what I did, and that's what became my role after a long, long time, after, as I said, many decades. But once I convinced myself that being quiet and not speaking is not possible anymore, I taught myself, I toughened myself until I could talk, until I could say it without breaking down, and started going on March of the Living quite a few times, sometimes a day. And the children inspired me because many of them became workers for the Holocaust, for understanding, and aware, aware persons to life, to anti-Semitism, to world affairs. And I, I thought it was something worthwhile I must keep on doing as long as I can. Right, Nate?
Yeah, Nate, please.
Well, it was a long journey before we started talking. At first, of course, nobody understood, and nobody wanted to listen because it was very painful, and we did not know how to tell our story because we were very emotional by telling the story and recalling who we lost. So it was very difficult for us, and it was difficult for the audience our family to hear. But then, 1965 came along, and the trial of Eichmann, which changed everything because suddenly the survivors came into the limelight. But my own journey was we joined a synagogue and because we had children in 1965. We had a daughter, three daughters by then, and we needed Holocaust. We needed education for them. I had none, so we decided to join a synagogue in Bethel, and we joined the synagogue, and then I became active in the synagogue life, and then I moved from synagogue life to the Holocaust Remembrance Committee of the Canadian Jewish Congress. And there I started to become active in talking. At first, we talked to the confirmation class of our temple together with Eli Gotz. The duo went to the retreat and we talked about our experiences. And that was the beginning. And then 1980s, we started to think about, I joined the Canadian Jewish Congress, and and I was also a member of the Toronto Jewish, as chair of the Toronto Jewish Congress Committee of Holocaust Committee. And then we decided that we needed to tell the story, but we had no venue. So we started to think about creating a venue, and we created the Toronto Holocaust Education Center in 1985, which is today the Toronto Holocaust Museum, and an outgrowth of that. And we had, actually hundreds of survivors talk, and we developed programs, and it became an industry almost, and we realized that it's very important that the future generations know what was happened, because the level of ignorance about the Holocaust, like as Hedy said, was so great, and the denial was around us, and we had to make sure that the tragedy is not forgotten, that it is a historic fact, that nobody can deny it, and that it became part of the history of our people. And the important thing was that our youth should know, that our people should know what we suffered and what we would survive, and to give us impetus to go on, and to, Israel certainly helped. And as you can see today, it's very disappointing to see that the world hasn't learned anything, that today we are encountering such terrible hatred and threats of destruction from Iran, the destruction of the Jewish people in Israel. And so the only thing that changed is the persecutors. We, as a people, were still the same people, the remnant. But today there's a big difference. Had we had in Israel in 1938, there would have not been a Holocaust.
Mm.
Today we
Sorry.
have Israel, and it preventing from the Holocaust to reoccur, because if it wasn't for Israel and the armed forces and the dedication of the Jewish peoples around the world, the regime of Khomeini's in Iran would have had the day, and they would have destroyed us again. But today it's a different world. We've learned, but the world has not. We've learned to what it means to be, a powerless victim. So today we are not a powerless victim any longer. And the price that we have to pay for being Jewish and maintaining a Jewish state is terrible. When you see the return of the hostages from Hamas, it's so painful to look at them and to see and to remember our survival, how we came out from terrible situations. And the situation is not over. There's still, close to 100 people incarcerated in the tunnels of Hamas. And the world is silent. The world is standing up for the people who did the massacre. The Hamas.
I know it's been a very devastating time, and it's certainly, I think is very traumatic to see, the suffering of Jewish people continuing in a way that echoes, experiences that we're talking about today with the Holocaust. And we're almost out of time, so I'm so sorry to interrupt, but just because we're going to be wrapping up our session in a few minutes, I did want to share some really powerful messages from people in the chat. Not a question, just an impression. I'm struck by how vivid your experiences are, and it's almost as if we are there with you during that time. And I think that really speaks to how powerful and important it is to have direct witnesses like yourselves sharing your testimony, sharing your memories of the evidence and the truth of what happened in Auschwitz. So that is very powerful for us all here today to hear. Maybe as one last very quick, just so you both can offer some last thoughts, could we just hear what in your opinion, what are the most critical lessons for us to take from the Holocaust today for students?
You want me to go? Okay.
Sure, Nate. Yeah. Do you want to begin? And then Hedy, you can
Sure.
have the last word.
I think that the message to our young people is that we have survived the most difficult enemies that we had. And our strength is the fact that we have survived 2,000 years of persecution and deportation and expulsions and all of the other troubles. And the only thing that survived that we have is that we have to be proud of the accomplishment of our community, of the accomplishment of the people who came before us, who the Jews that contributed so greatly to the Western culture, and to remember that we are an ancient nation, that we brought lots of light to the world, and that we have to continue to be strong and go on and remain Jews, and we will not give up, and it will never happen. It may happen to others, which it did happen after the Holocaust, but it will never happen to us, because we know that if somebody says, I'm going to kill you, we believe it.
Thank you. And yeah, Hedy, critical lessons that we need to teach future generations about the Holocaust.
What Nate just said, it rebounds in my mind because it's so true. We have so many enemies, but we survived this. We can survive it all. And now we have an Israel, which we didn't have before, thank God, which means everything to me. And I hope it will mean a lot to people, Jewish people everywhere in the world, not to take it for granted, but support it. Support it because it's so important. We're not helpless anymore. We have a country, we have an army, but we have to appreciate them and support them all from all our strengths.